Welcome to another episode of Mahogany and Willow. How are you, Jeanette?
Good. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Swallowing my rosemary, thank you.
I do it. It's good for you. So, positive thinking will let you do everything better than negative thinking will, by the great and wonderful Zig Ziglar. So today, our hope is that our listeners will see that our minds are not forever set in stone. What we think, and how we feel all depends upon our attitude and our mindset. And I hope that the listeners today will learn that there are ways to actually rewire the brain to start them on a journey of thinking more positively, which will lead them to happier, healthier, and more fulfilling lives and better relationships.
Nice.
So what do you think of when you hear somebody say, oh, she's such a positive person. Look at her. She's so positive. And they always think so positive and think positive. What are your thoughts on all that?
Years ago, I watched an interview with Michael J. Fox, and it was right after he wrote the book, Always Looking Up, The Adventures of an Incurable Optimist. And I'm one of those people who I was taught do positive affirmations. And at the same time, I kind of wasn't feeling like a more positive person. And in it, he talked about optimism actually being a profound state of acceptance. He actually talked about not putting a positive spin on what is, as in if you hate doing something, trying to convince yourself that you love doing it or anything like that. It was more deeply respecting and appreciating what is instead. So if I really hate doing this chore, respect and appreciate that this is not my favorite chore. And maybe from that moment, I can then ask myself a question like, what would make this chore easier for me? Do you see what I mean?
Yes.
Well, if I was to just sit there and try to put a positive spin on that and try to convince myself that I loved it, I think I would do it in resistance at all times, and I don't think I would ever move from there. Positive mindset is really interesting for me. I think it's more about just respecting and appreciating what is.
Right. Well, that is interesting. I always love your takes on things because it makes me go, I never thought of it that way. But you mentioned Michael J. Fox, and of course, everybody loves him. And the fact that he has that debilitating disease is absolutely heartbreaking. But I, like everyone else in this country, has watched him for years with his attitude and his full acceptance with the way that things are in his life. And you know that with everything going on in his world with Parkinson's, how it's progressively getting worse, but it affects the family. It affects everybody. It affects, of course, his ability to work anymore, anything like that. And his optimism is something to be absolutely appreciated and admired. Attitude and mindset is everything, but human nature can take over. And when we're facing something like what he's facing, whether it's a horrible diagnosis or a certain death, suffering is something that's just going to happen. And to be able to accept that is absolutely admirable. When I think of a positive attitude or mindset, I'm not thinking of what I have to actually accept, but whether or not my mind can shift into the silver lining mode. Because the way I see things, as far as the way I'm wired, is that I try very hard to always see the silver lining. I don't know if that is relatable as far as, yes, positive mindset, but I've always tried to see the silver lining in things. And when you're faced with some horrible disease or something like that, to be able to do that is such an amazing quality. But I would hope that if I were to ever receive anything such as a diagnosis like that I'd be able to seek better health, better mindset, better focus, anything like that to help get through that situation.
When I started on my journey of self-exploration years ago, I started with, of course, the positive affirmations because that was the popular topic in the 80s and the 90s, you know.
Right.
And I feel like it gave a foundation of sorts for what then led into the law of attraction. So even through the years, though, that I spent focusing on positive affirmations, I was also seeing and hearing way more evidence about how that wasn't the thing that was transforming people's lives, though. They were still remaining stuck. They were still in the same places they were starting out as. So positive affirmations didn't feel like it had a lot of grounding in that. And then fast forward from there to the law of attraction, you know, era of everything, and everything that we've come to understand about the theory of fake it till you make it, living it before you're living it kind of stuff. And even after all these years of the law of attraction workshops and teachings and everything, we still have just as much evidence that it has its limitations, that it's still not quite the missing piece. So it's interesting to overlay that with what Michael J. Fox was talking about, with that pure state of acceptance. Like, he doesn't say Parkinson's is a fun, fantastic, wonderful thing.
Right.
He's just from a very deeply, I accept that this is where I am. And from here, I'm going to do the best I can with that kind of thing. So do you believe that there are similarities between the positive attitudes and mindsets along with the law of attraction? And do you find that those things really work for you?
I love that question. Yes, because I too, like you, jumped on the whole law of attraction bandwagon years back. For me, it was around 2008. And I had an interesting moment in my life where I needed something. So I don't even remember how that happened, but I stumbled on to the movie The Secret.
Right.
And that's when it was really gaining momentum right then. And during this awful breakup, somehow that thing fell into my lap, and I figured out that there was a book to accompany it. So I grabbed the book, and I was very faithful to that type of a mindset. And it was some of the best authors you could ever, have come together and make this movie and write this book. And the law of attraction worked for me in changing my mindset from sadness, broken heart, what am I going to do? Oh, devastation. I'm a single mom, all this stuff, to getting up every morning, expressing gratitude, which of course you and I are very huge on gratitude, before my feet hit the ground. Gratitude, thank you, whether it's prayer, whether it was meditation, whatever it was, and getting up every day with one foot in front of the other and thinking constantly about the good and the positive, and showing gratitude for what I had. And it literally started a snowball effect for me that didn't stop for years. I think it went all the way up to 2014. It was just this nonstop motion forward of amazing stuff that just kept happening. And the more that I kept thinking positively, seeing the silver linings, gratitude, I mean, I went crazy with it. It changed my life. I was able to get away from the situation and land into a beautiful home. I graduated from college. I got a great job. I then bought a house. I was a single parent. And then one thing after another that led me up to 2014. And then that, a new season of life kicks in,
right,
which is, what happens to us ladies, and set me back a little bit. But I'll tell you, because I'd been in such a mindset role for so long, that I wasn't down very long, and I bounced right back. And it was just, again, forward motion, and has brought me here. And yes, there's been downs in between. There's been crazy stuff that's happened in between. But because of the ability to constantly think in a positive way, and positive affirmations, silver linings, attitude adjustments, being able to catch, and I call it having my own mind cop in my brain that catches me if I feel like I'm slipping backwards, because we all have our moments. It doesn't matter what it is. And to be able to catch myself and say, hey, no, we're not going to do that today. We're going to think about the good. Look at all the good. Look at the rounds. You got this, you got that. You're so blessed. You're so lucky. That is what my brain is wired to do. But I did that for myself. And I think that having the ability to rewire your brain and, look at Michael J. Fox, most people would just crumble in that situation. But he's wired. I think he's always been that way, just who he was as a person. But to keep moving forward and accept the way things are, but see the silver linings and the beauty and have gratitude is so key. So, gratitude for me is probably the biggest foundation of it all.
And do you find that there are subjects in life, though, that are easier for you to search for a positive mindset around? Do you feel like there's topics or subjects that are not quite as easy? And what do you do with the not so easy topics?
That's a tough question. That's a good question. Wow. So yes and no. So yes, there are some times where it's obviously easy just to bounce right back and keep moving forward and see the good and always have those positive little chirps in my ear. But, as you know, I've been tested immensely over the last year and a half, and that is probably been the toughest time for me to have the mind cop in my head say, hey, that's not good. Let's get you back on track. Come on, girl. You've got all these great things. So I would say that absolutely 100% I'm human and have had some big tests over the last year and a half that have set me back further than I've ever been. But the ability and a habit in my head to keep that positive and check, I just bounce right back. And it may take 10 days, it may take 3 months. And it's done that for me in the last several months. But the ability to keep moving forward is huge and have that mind cop. I don't know what else to call it. It's the only thing I can call it.
So how do you take, say a specific subject, how do you take that do you take that specific subject and think a positive thought about it? Or do you just distract yourself and think of gratitude about other things and allow that feeling to kind of roll over?
That's a good question. I'm literally thinking about it as you ask me. I can give examples if that would help, because I can't really answer that specifically. If I'm the kind of person that when you lose somebody, whether it's let's say you're at a funeral and you sit there and you look around and you think, boy, that person was loved. That is a beautiful thing. What an amazing turnout. Look at all these people that came to celebrate this person's life. And then my mind switches to, oh my gosh, look at all these great people that we get to see. We get to come together and have a moment to celebrate that person's life, but we also get to see each other. That's just where my mind goes automatically. When it's something that's really bad, I have to really dig deep and say, okay, you know what? I don't need that in my life anymore. So what I do is I think I just cut it out. That's kind of my mindset. If it's a really bad situation, just cut it out. There's nothing else I can do to change that, fix that, change that person's mind, whatever it is. I just cut it out and I focus on the good. So it's almost like it's not even there and just look at the good. That's the way I do it, because any other way doesn't make sense to me. That's the way I do it. How about you, though, in your situation where, you're tested, you've been tested, how do you focus?
I definitely have the Michael J. Fox's, not because of him, but I definitely do it that way. I think that's why I always remembered him and that book and that interview that I saw it was so long ago, but I think that's why that always stuck with me.
Yeah.
Because like I said, I was told you have to have positive affirmations. And yeah, that's fine and great for the subjects that are easy to find positive affirmations about.
Right.
But I noticed very quickly that I couldn't fool myself. I could think anything I wanted to, and if my emotions weren't in alignment with what I was saying, I could just hear the BS alarms going off in my own brain.
Right.
I couldn't get past that. I felt I actually identified as a pessimist. I thought I was a pessimist because I just assumed if I couldn't wrap a positive affirmation around every subject, that I was just a negative person. I was a pessimist.
Oh, wow.
And until I heard him speak about that, that's when I realized, no, I truly am one of those people who looks for the acceptance. I want to accept whatever is in front of me. And if that means I have to work through the kicking and screaming part, which I've done repeatedly,
Right.
through some of the hardest things I've ever been through.
Yeah.
But the acceptance part, that deep respect and acceptance is where I go. I'll do that all day long. I do it, from morning till night. That's just a daily practice for me.
That's interesting. And I may have never looked at some of the things that I personally have been through as acceptance when I just mentioned about cutting things out.
Right.
I think that could be also described as being in that acceptance mode, accepting that I cannot change that. So therefore it goes on the back burner and I focus on the good and the things I can not change necessarily, but I that give me good, that give me what I need, and that I can express love and gratitude towards those things, where that other thing, accept the fact that I can't change it and put it on the back burner. So that really just enlightened me a little bit about the fact that might be acceptance for myself in those ways too, which is really interesting if you think about it, because you can't constantly stuff a square peg in a round hole kind of a thing and say, oh, positive, here we go. You're going to make a positive out of this. It's literally impossible to do that with everything. So acceptance is a huge part of it. So yeah, thank you.
There's also the idea, as you were saying that, what came to mind was there are times where a negative emotion actually brings about the most positive outcome. Mm-hmm. So I really struggle with the positive negative polarity, I guess. I think there's so much wiggle room in there. And I think it's not sad, but at the same time, kind of sad that we focus on needing the positivity as if you can't get there, there's something wrong with you, or you won't attract something better.
Right.
And that's not exactly the truth, because even something like, say, anger, if I get angry about something, it's like my internal compass saying something about this isn't working. And that's a very positive message to hear. Mm-hmm. If instead of beating myself up for being a negative Nelly, if I don't do that and I really look at that message as something informative, it's a positive message.
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
So it's certainly not cut and dry as far as, the theory in and of itself.
No, and I think that instead of, like what you were saying, laying claim to, okay, that's negative, that's positive, that's negative, that's positive. I see what you're saying. There's negative things that happen, and then again, the silver linings. I don't look at that negative and think, oh man, that's just going down the rabbit hole. I'm going to spin in a negative vortex of whatever. There's always something that comes out of it, whether it's a painful thing, a loss, whatever it is. There's something on the backside that comes out of it, which I call the silver linings. And some people will just live in a negative, positive type of a world. And I agree with you that it isn't that simple, not at all. But very interesting nonetheless, though, the way that people perceive things. So what would your advice be on keeping a positive mindset while shit is hitting the fan?
Well, I think the goal for me would be to encourage people to develop the skills needed to move themselves from maybe what might feel bad to any level of relief. When we learn how to do that incrementally, we actually rewire our brains based upon the strategy of movement, not the end goal as far as positive or, getting to a positive mindset. We actually rewire the brain to accomplish the tasks that then move us from whatever emotion that we're feeling currently to something that just feels a little bit better. And to me, that would be the main goal. Otherwise, you're trying to ignore all the messages that we receive from life, except the ones we want to hear. I mean, that's the other alternative, is to just shut out as much as we can when everything is about growth and development. And if I'm trying to avoid messages that make me feel either negative emotions or make me think negative thoughts, I'm not developing and growing. I'm not evolving there. Right. And so I think that in practice, as we set the goal of just moving in these incremental steps, I think after a while, our brain would start performing. And actually, I know this to be true because my brain does it all the time now. But our brain actually starts to make that journey on its own, even when there's something very, very powerful. Right now, my ego, my psyche, whatever you want to call it, really can use grief. It can use sadness. And it's almost like every day I hit this moment where that tries to kind of jump in, and I recognize instantly my brain now maneuvers away from it. Not maneuvers away from it as if it's not there,
Right.
not as if I'm avoiding it at all,
Right.
but it starts to maneuver away from it as if, okay, I got this. I know where there's a little relief, and just a little relief creates that step to the next step, to the next step, to the
Yeah.
next step. And for me, that's the main goal. I don't think that, at no time am I ever going to feel like negative or positive are the goals at all. It's just
Right.
that movement. So my advice to anyone about keeping a positive mindset is to always instead focus on just moving a negative emotion a little bit and a little bit. And I can give you an example. Like if I feel angry, I can shift to, when you think about anger, anger can be very intense, and it can also feel very constricting. And if I can move myself to a feeling of frustration, if I can go from I'm angry about this and this is causing me to feel this heavy weighted feeling to frustration, frustration is one step above anger, and there's actually a little bit of relief. And to a lot of people, that's kind of shocking because when we're focused on a positive mindset, we want to go from anger to joy. And there's no way to make a leap such as that because there's so many emotions in between those two things. Mm-hmm. But anger to frustration or anger to impatience, those are actual movements in a relieving direction. And to me, that would always be better than anything else that I could actually think of. There are actually images. If you go on Google, you can look up images for what they call an emotional scale. And I used to carry one of those in my wallet at all times because it just shows you one step above, and you've gotten to relief. And from that step, you can then attain the next step much easier. And sometimes you can do that just moment by moment by moment. It doesn't take much time. So I recommend that people do that. If you've never heard of the emotional scale or you've never seen it, I would certainly look that up. And if you can print one of those little puppies out and put it in your, keep it in your purse, wherever you've got to keep it, if you find yourself in those negative, heavy emotions quite frequently, there's nothing wrong with you. You're not a pessimist. It's just not, the brain hasn't been trained to move that emotional scale.
Right.
We're trying to go from really heavy emotions to really high emotions. And that would be like me trying to go from the ground to the roof.
Right.
With no steps in between. And I'm going nowhere, obviously. Yeah. So
Wow.
those are the things that I would recommend.
That is really interesting, though. If you take a mental picture, I was literally doing that as you were talking about going from the lowest of lows and trying to get to the joyous moment, and how much is in between is really shocking, actually, if you think about it.
It is. And yet people feel like there's something wrong with them if they can't go from like maybe powerlessness. Oh, I feel so powerlessness, or I feel so powerless and I want to feel happy. Good luck, because there's no roadmap to that.
Right.
I mean, it's literally like a road to nowhere.
Right.
You can't do that.
Well, in a world of instant gratification, when people are in the lowest of lows, what do? They reach for something that's going to give them that, which could be something that isn't good for them, and it's fleeting. It's just a momentary blissful moment that might be induced by something that isn't healthy, and then they're right back to the same thing. And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done from the bottom all the way up. And
the work is incredibly simple. I literally cannot say that enough. People think, wow, that sounds really hard. And it's so not. It's so much simpler, and it happens so much quicker when you do it in that incremental space. You get there.
Right.
And once you start that pattern, and that pattern just starts happening to you, all the pressure's off. It's kind of lovely.
So is that something you want to elaborate on? As far coaching?
As far as that emotional scale, I just think anyone who can have that emotional scale in their mind, in their pocket, wherever you can get that, just have that with you and move that just step by step by step, and don't try to skip steps. It's going to be really tempting. When you start out, it's really tempting.
Well, I'm interested in that. I'll have to check that out. And that maybe we should link that
definitely.
to the podcast down in, on Facebook or Instagram, to be able to link that information for the scale, because I think that would be really beneficial.
Definitely.
So to elaborate a little bit on what you were talking about with the scale, I looked up some information as well, and scientists study the effects of positive thinking and what good it does for our overall well-being. So obviously, it is very healthy for us to try to stay on the positive side. It's something that you can literally feel. So they found people who continuously think positively have better coping skills, higher productivity, better resilience, higher creativity, less stress, decreased risk of heart attack, higher pain tolerance, and an overall better health in regards to fighting diseases, which in itself is like all the reason to get the scale and do the work, right?
Right.
Studies show that the brain has heightened our prefrontal cortex activity when one thinks positively, which results in enhanced creative thinking, cognitive flexibility, and even faster processing.
But that only happens if you believe it. There is a caveat to that one.
Oh, well, if you believe it,
you have to buy it.
Yeah.
So you can't trick yourself, though, because your brain won't believe you. So there is
that makes total sense.
Aspect. Yeah.
Right.
For sure.
So again, get the scale, do the work, and then the rest will fall into place, it sounds like. So when we focus on the good things in our lives, it puts things in perspective and makes it easier to always see the silver linings in situations. Some people continuously recite positive affirmations to set the tone for each new day, which will surely affect their mood and how they approach the tasks at hand. So I really enjoyed looking up some of that information. I also put some bullet points in here for the ways that we can rewire our brain to think positively, like daily exercise for the brain. And again, scales, exercise. So when faced with a negative thought, by turning it around into a positive thought, it to hopefully see the silver linings, pretty soon you'll automatically start thinking that way. Interact with people that think like you. So that old saying, I've heard that my whole life, I think, you are who you hang around. That is true. So if you hang around people that are the constant negative, pessimist, whatever thought process they have, whatever extracurricular activities they do, you're going to end up being that type of person. And if you want to make some major changes in your life, then maybe it's time to make those kind of changes and be around the positive thinkers as well. Our environments are we absorb that on a daily basis. Volunteer your services or knowledge base to others that are in need, such as community involvement. It could be anything from the Fiddle Festival to the Senior Center to food banks, anything like that. There's something about giving back that really ignites a fire in a person and makes them feel really good. So it's very simple stuff if you think about it. Right. So again, do the simple things that bring you joy. Go on walks, go to the beach, go on vacation, go out with friends, go to the mountains, get some fresh air, get out and do something. It will literally change your mindset. And whether it's yoga or exercise or the fresh air outside, it's amazing what it can do for us. Right. And allow yourself to be loved and appreciated. Everyone gets positive vibes and emotions out of being loved, which in turn makes it easier to give love back. That's a big one.
Yeah, absolutely. And we love all of you. And we hope we've given you some things to think about when it comes to the power of positivity. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Mahogany and Willow.
Because there's always something important to talk about.